Tell the Story, the podcast that brings you the raw, honest, and powerful conversations with the men and women who have served. We dive into the realities of service, the weight of sacrifice, and the road to resilience. Today, I'm honored to welcome a guest who is actively fighting to save the lives in the veteran community. Brianne Brown is a U.S. Air Force veteran and the Central Florida Regional Programs Director for the Fire Watch, an organization that is leading the charge in veteran suicide prevention. With a deep passion for connecting service members and veterans to purpose and resilience, she has dedicated her post-service career to ensuring that no one slips through the cracks. Today, we're going to dig deep into the mission of the Fire Watch, the veteran suicide epidemic, and the steps we can take to be a part of the solution. Our guest today is Brianne Brown. She honorably served 8 years in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty and reserve. Since transitioning out of the Air Force in 2017, she's become a leader in the nonprofit sector and veteran suicide prevention. Through her work, she has helped hundreds of veterans and service members find purpose and build resilience. Brianne now serves as the Central Florida Regional Programs Director for the Fire Watch. Brianne spearheads veterans advocacy with life-saving training to empower community members to connect veterans with the help they need before they reach a crisis point. Her mission is clear: to lift the fallen, restore the broken, and heal the hurting. Brianne, welcome to Tell the Story.
Recording.
There we go. Since you said it.
See, right, within the dynamics of a bio where you're trying to build your LinkedIn, I've heard so many times that it's so hard for us to talk about ourselves, right? And it looks
not
so
hard.
different
It's
in
the
the
absolute
conformity
worst.
it is, but we almost don't know how to talk about ourselves. And when we do, it's in bullet point form, right? So it sounds very direct, forward, straight to the point, and nothing really broken down in the context of an elaboration. You know, it's really, really easy to speak about those hard points. But what I kind of feel like it's more vulnerable and harder to speak about the softer points.
It is. It's funny you say that, because when I transitioned out, I was trying to think to myself, how do I use all of the things that I've done and put it in civilian language? And you know, I have all the hard skills. What are the soft skills? Yeah. And I actually had to look up, what are soft skills? So Google helped me with that. And then I hired somebody to help me with my resume and translate all of that stuff. And then I've probably spent a good 2 days, like 16 hours working on my LinkedIn bios and all of that stuff, trying to make myself marketable. And I have no idea what any of that stuff means. And then I just came to find out, you know what, I'm going to work for myself. So none of this really matters anyway.
Well, gosh, when you think about it, in just within the dynamic of military culture, we have our own language.
We do.
So it's like having to relearn a whole nother language because we are speaking something completely different, and we have to try to conform now to the new norm. And that looks different for everybody. But in terms of transition, I remember it was actually this time last year that I met you, and you know, we had that conversation, you and I asked you, how's your transition going out of the law enforcement world? And this is kind of how we started having the conversation between you and I when we initially met. So I don't know if you want to kind of share how that came about, but it was this time last year that we were talking about transition.
Yeah, and I absolutely do, because I think that's important. That's one of the big things when you get out of the military or leave a life of service is what's next? What does that look like? Because you don't have to worry about what am I going to wear, because it's already given to you. And when you explain to people, you know, and I remember you asking, how's transition? I said, well, I'll let you know when I figure it out. And I had already been retired for almost a year. And I still don't have a better answer for it. I don't talk to people like this anymore. So that hand gesture's gone.
Oh, yeah. I might still have it in there. And tuck it in my back pocket. But it comes
I do
out
it
when
to
it
my
needs
son.
to come out. Okay?
Yeah, when my son when he asks something, not today, son. Not going to go back to that guy. But yeah, transition has been odd. And I think I've had it easier than others, because with the pension and all that stuff, I didn't have to hustle. I didn't have to get into anything right away. So I was able to pull back and just kind of get some space and just sit with everything for a bit and figure a lot of stuff out. So I was able to take time without any risk to learn that new language. And you know, I've gone to a couple of the transition meetings that, you know, some of the veterans organizations here in the Bay Area put on. One of the first ones I went to, they said something that very, very profound, that yes, we have our own language, to your point, and we know how to speak to the people that we speak to. And then we wonder, how come the people in the corporate world don't understand what I'm saying? Well, what have we done to learn their language? Because you're right, it is a completely different language with all the circle backs and bubble ups and touch points and the ROIs and the KSAs. And I don't even know if I used any of that stuff right, to be honest with you. But
Well,
You know, it's
transition is not secular. And that's what a
no,
lot of people don't understand. It really isn't secular. Unfortunately, it's something that we all face. You can't, can't go under it, can't go around it. You just have to go through it. We might have parallels as veterans within the dynamic of a similar struggle, whether it be job placement or just the adjustment piece, could be the financial restraint that you kind of spoke about, right? As far as people who didn't retire. But I think it affects the entire person, all areas, mentally, physically, socially, spiritually. It also affects all of those who are around them as they're transitioning. Friends, family members, coworkers. So again, this transition piece, it can get messy, but it's a refinement process, like any process. And you're not always going to get it right the first time, and that's okay. Right. I think, for example, for myself, I was active duty 5 years, decided to transition, into the reserve component. So I go to school full time. I was undergrad, went to grad school. Everything was in criminal justice, right? I was so set on going into a federal job. That's just what I had always wanted to do. Military is never really a 20-year career move for me. And I started volunteering with the Veterans Treatment Court Mentor Corps here in the greater Tampa Bay area. So this is kind of where I actually fell in love with the idea of working with veterans for veterans, and maybe even the idea of a nonprofit space. And I've sat on a transition panel, or sometimes when I go into other transition groups who are helping veterans through that time. And, the corporate world is not the only world. Just don't forget, there's a lot of fruitful opportunities in the nonprofit space. It's not for everybody, but that is kind of where I ended up finding myself. And again, transition is not secular. I thought I was going to go in one direction, and God will typically call you to do other things. And if you answer that calling, he'll equip you for it. And I've been in that space for the last 5 years, and the nonprofit space specifically, and veteran suicide prevention arena. So I enjoy every bit of it. It sounds cliche, especially in this role, in this job, but I love what I do. I absolutely love what I do.
well, I think it's one of the questions I wanted to ask you with your transition. What do you think is one of the most important things when you do transition, whether it's business world or nonprofit space? What do you think is the secret sauce if you're moving into something else, or if you're just retiring and not going to do anything?
Again, I think my greatest piece of advice of not only going through myself, but watching other folks, transition is not secular. There is no one right way to do it.
Yeah.
There is not one avenue. It might take a year, it might take 2 years. You really just kind of have to figure out what works for you. It's just like, right? You have the fish, you take the meat, spit out the bones. You have to be willing to go and, you do. You actually have to be ready, willing, and able. But I also think there's a component of acceptance in there. Accept that it's going to be a little messy and that you're not going to find yourself right away. My other huge piece of advice is making sure that you set up a solid support system. So I'm a huge advocate for safety care plans. It's another prevention tool. Fill it with resources, places that you can go, people who you can call for different things, your who, your what, your why, whatever that is for you. Make sure you build a solid support system. However, if you do not utilize the support system, it's no good.
Yeah.
That plan is no good for you.
Yeah.
Build a plan, utilize the plan, because you will need to use that at some point within this transition period. And we also know the first 2 years are the pretty heavy years, and some of the hardest when transitioning out of the military for anyone, whether you made it a career or however many years you served. It's still a mindset, still a new way of life that you have to kind of transition out of or refine, if you will. Again, build that solid support network, but utilize it.
Yeah, I've found that the tribe, because when we leave, you leave the team room, everybody's still doing the job. They're still doing the military thing. They're still doing the first responder thing, and you're not part of that anymore. So you kind of miss that. And if you don't have purpose and mission, and if you don't find that before you leave or have a plan for that, you're right. If you don't have a plan and execute the plan, it's going to be even messier than it really had to be. I remember after I retired, I had a buddy. He's a retired aviator, and he's asking me how it's going. About 6 weeks into it, and I was like, "Bro, this is awesome. I'm riding my bike every day. I'm getting in better shape. I sleep better. My hair's getting darker. All of these things." And And he said, "So do you have it figured out yet?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Oh, bro, I've been retired 6 years now." He says, "It's going to take you time to figure it out." I'm like, I don't understand why these guys like, okay, I retired, I left this place, and 6 months later, I'm going right back to the same place I retired from. Like, what? Why? Why didn't you just stay? And, like you said, it's different for every single person. Folks will say, "Oh, I got bored. I couldn't buy any more toys." Like, yeah, bro, find something to do. Find a hobby, find a tribe, find somebody that's going to keep you accountable, who knows your plan and is going to keep you on that plan.
Well,
That's
even
one
in
of the
the
things I
crisis,
found successful.
when I worked more with active duty and veterans, the crisis portion, people don't understand, sometimes from the outside in how difficult the transition is. I heard it sounds very simplistic, but hard, right? Because you made a statement a little bit earlier about, you didn't have to think about what we were doing and what we were wearing every day. Well, unfortunately, this gentleman, 30 years in, through his transition period, some of his tipping points were sitting on the bed and not knowing what socks to put on. You didn't have to think about things like that. Just small things as they add up start to become a daunting process for people. Nobody would really even think of that. But again, it's those small things that can add up. Yeah, it gets difficult for people again. So I think that is my biggest takeaway for the transition element. Is it's not secular. Build a solid support system and utilize it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So the Firewatch, you guys are doing a lot of solid work, and I know you've been very involved with suicide prevention. Can you give us an overview of the Firewatch and what it is that y'all are doing?
Sure. So we are a nonprofit in Florida's fight against veteran suicide. You already kind of gave an introduction. I cover the Central Florida regional area. However, my heaviest footprint is Hillsborough, Pinellas County. That's just because the veteran suicide rates are the highest in this area. We have 3 regional program directors, one Northeast Florida, where the Firewatch was founded in 19. Myself, that covers Central Florida, and then my teammate, South Florida, Henry Angelo. We definitely have our work cut out for us. We're a small nonprofit, but we are 2 things. We are both a prevention program and a community-based program. So what we're doing is offering free training, which is comprised of military culture education, and then also the suicide prevention piece based on the SAVE initiative, SAVE. It stands for Science, Ask, Validate, and Encourage and Expedite Help. So essentially, we're teaching individuals not only about the culture, but also, the warning signs of suicide, the myths about suicide, getting away from the stigma of asking the question, but more importantly, some statewide resources that they can connect veterans to before they slip into crisis. Right? Because this is not a program that's just for veterans. We involve the community members. So it's for anyone and everyone who cares about a military veteran. If you're not a veteran yourself, especially in Florida as a heavily populated military state, you are spouse or dependent upon, or you know one. Guaranteed. So again, This is for anyone and everyone. The training is free for any individual. As a web learner, they can go to thefirewatch.org. They can take the training online. So that is our first pillar program, which is our Watch Dinner program. Or we have a second pillar program, which is called our Veteran Safe Place program. So what this does is it allows one of the regional programs director to go into any place of employment, business, group, or organization and facilitate the Watch Dinner training for them, which again is free. And they have the opportunity to become involved, again, what's called the Veteran Safe Place. So it's an internal program to the Firewatch. Oftentimes they have Guard Reserve veterans that either A, work for them, 2, they want to hire them, or they're servicing them in some way. So not only is it showing support that business or organization has for the veteran community and those that, that work for them, that they're serving, but they're also giving life-changing tools to all of the employees. And this goes beyond the professional capacity, whether they're working with veterans or not working with veterans, but also in the personal capacity. So it goes beyond the walls of the workplace, right? Because we are in the community, we are everywhere. So we want to teach and engage and equip and encourage all folks to stand watch and to be a part of that movement and that community. So what it really does is it alleviates a lot of pressure off of the veteran from always having to come forward to ask for help, because that is one of the things that we teach. And I get a lot of comments when I have veterans in the group And I asked them, hey, which of these 15 do you feel like you relate to the most? And number 10 just happens to be, it's really hard for us to ask for help, which it may be for everyone. However, with this program, it is another form of, again, the proactive component of prevention and allowing them to have a conversation or somebody to have a conversation with a veteran. And in this conversation, alleviates the pressure off the veteran from always having to come forward to say, hey, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. Because there's a trust factor component, right? And there's also a piece of vulnerability when veterans are sharing. So from a larger scope, that is what the Firewatch is doing and building these communities, again, community members, business owners, and individuals who are active duty guard, reserve, veterans, or just patriots who love our military members here in the state. But again, giving them life-changing tools that they can take with them no matter where they go.
I think that's awesome. You said so many wonderful things in there. I wanted to back up. One of the first things and what you said that hit me was there's a larger problem with veterans dying by suicide in the Bay Area. Is that because of the concentration, because we have the large VA system here, we have MacDill and all that stuff, or?
So there's a lot of speculation. I don't like to assume and I don't like to speculate because James A. Haley's a really great hospital. They have one of the only PrEP programs here in the state. They have a great polytrauma unit. There's a lot of nonprofits that are here within the Bay Area that are kind of filling that gap. And we're all in veteran suicide prevention. We all just have a different delivery and how we're delivering that into the community. But what I can tell you is the veteran suicide rates for the state is 2.5 times higher than non-veterans. So that's still a pretty big gap. So again, this is why we have a heavy focus and emphasis, at least for now, in the state of Florida. Once we reach the goal of 10,000 watch shooters, we're looking to expand and hope that other states see, hey, what we're doing is working. I don't know if there's some people who are kind of data, but one of the unique things that we do with the Firewatch is we are collecting data for the state. So if you go to the firewatch.org, you go to the data tab, you can actually click on there, look at the state, and it's broken down by county. So we have that information there. So it does also offer community members an opportunity to see what scope, because you can break it down by your own access, age, race, gender, and then means of death, to see what population in this county do we need to target so we can service them better.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, so this is combined efforts, and it's all in collaboration. There's no competition. All collaboration.
That was one of the next questions I was going to ask you, because my work, however brief it was, with Irreverent Warriors, we put on hikes. Well, the Irreverent Warriors, they put on hikes, and it's just a camaraderie thing to bring people together out in the space and with everyone. And, we just need funding to pay for permits and food when we get, 400 vets out marching through major cities. And it's not really a heavy lift in some places, but I found here in Tampa, because, Haley's here, Bay Pine's here, MacDill's here. I mean, it's a wonderful place to retire. I found trying to get into the veteran nonprofit space just to, and there was no ask on my end. It's just, hey, we're here. We're trying to get a footprint here. I am the organization here. And what can I do for you? It was kind of rough. It really was. And I was like, okay, well, I know that there are like 1,000 nonprofits for veterans in the Tampa Bay area, but you said, we're all doing the same mission, just with a different delivery. How difficult was it for the Firewatch to get a footing here and to be where you're at? Because I found it was extremely difficult, because people, I felt, were looking at me like I was looking to take a piece of their, not a piece of their action, but move in to pull from their funding, because funding is a big thing. I understand that. So I had to start off, everything was, hey, I'm Doug White. There is no ask here, but what can I do for you? And it was, still a little tentative on talking to me and all that other stuff. But have you experienced any of that in the space?
So when it comes specifically to funding, our biggest ask when we're in the community is to go on and do training. That is our ask. This is the best way that folks can give back. And it shows their support without the monetary funding. Funding is necessary. Mm-hmm. We do that like any other nonprofit by other means. But that is our ask. That is the greatest currency, in my opinion, that we can receive. is to educate and equip all individuals to be, again, not only have credibility and competency and having conversation in that dynamic with veterans, maybe to be understanding of some of the issues in and outside the workplace, but again, giving them the life-changing tools so they don't always have to go back and ask, well, what could I have done? Should I? What did I miss?
Yeah.
Right. And giving them the confidence to ask that question. There's no easy way to ask the question, but to ask the question. And I would rather ask the question if I see the signs and receive a no answer than not ask.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, it's an uncomfortable thing to do.
It can be. And let me finish your question. And then I do want to circle back to that component about the stigma around the question. However, when it comes to the footprint in this area, I am a one woman show for this area. So, I do get a lot of, oh my God, I see you all over the place. You're everywhere in a good way.
Really
but
are.
Unfortunately, I'm a one woman show. So it does require me to go out and to go to tabling events, to networking events, to introduce myself and put myself in those positions where I network and talk to people so that I can be the best advocate for the program. So people are aware who we are and that we're another resource within the Bay Area or within the Central Florida regional area, statewide area, what have you. It requires effort on my part to go out to meet people and to let people know who we are and the mission that we have, the vision that we have, and really our heart. Again, there's so many different veteran nonprofits. And why should I give to you? We're not asking for funding. Our ask is to come join the fight with us. And this is how, for our organization, you can help join the fight. That's just my personal opinion within the dynamic of that. You have to just kind of go into those spaces and insert yourself. And again, collaboration. And the people's, it's not like you kind of said earlier, I'm not here to sell anybody anything. The program is free.
Yeah.
It's a free program for all individuals. So it's really up to them whether or not they choose to take advantage of that and what that means to them. So again, you want people's heart to align and to believe in the mission of what you're doing, and we're here to do that. And then I just wanted to touch on asking the question. And this is one of the things, right, within the dynamic of the training that we're doing is, right, I told you it was based on the SAVE initiative. So signs, ask, validate, and then encouraging expedite hope. So asking the question. So one of the things that I like to ask folks, because I like to have a conversation with them. I don't want to talk at them because I am no mental health expert. I'm not a social worker, but I'm a veteran. I'm an advocate for preventing veteran suicide. So, I mean, I've lived out all of these experiences myself, right? Personally, I've lived out these experiences, not only just in the dynamic of my own personal testimony, my own personal story and what I've been through, but I've lived through the responsibility of caring for another individual who is was very close to me, experiencing suicide ideation. I've lost a family member to suicide. I've lived with the fear of me being the one to find them because that was the plan put in place, or the desperation to just want to help a loved one. And I think everybody is like, oh my God, I can feel your passion, because typically if it's passion, it's something that's personal.
Yeah.
And it has been personal, but I do ask them, why do you think the stigma exists? And you got to kind of think about the different dynamics. And a lot of people within the culture, it's taboo for a lot of cultures. It might be frowned upon by different cultures, by different religious infrastructures. Some is a mindset, right? What happens in this house stays in this house. It seems so different, but this is the dynamic. So you don't, whether it's you or somebody else, how do you ask for help when, you want to be kind of faithful to your family dynamic or fear, right? And some of these are just main motivation of emotions behind it. The fear of asking the question, what if they say yes? What do I do?
Yeah. And then do I own the problem to fix them? That's the fear. It's like, hey, how are you doing? Shit, they really told me how they're doing. Now, what do I have to do with this? I think that's why a lot of people stay away from that.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to own it, or feel that they would have to own it if they ask.
And then the dynamic of what I like to tell people when I'm facilitating the training, you are there to connect, not to counsel. This is why we give you some direct resources that you can call somebody who's trained in true intervention and might have some additional training and resources for suicide intervention. Remember, this is prevention for suicide intervention, that you can sit with them while you call and get them connected. That's that warm handoff. And then you connect them to the subject matter expert, just based on that veteran specific need at that time. So again, connect, not counsel, but also look in the dynamic of the military culture. If you want to put that into perspective, it's a form of weakness, it's mindset. But once you get out, I think you start to soon realize it's wisdom, not weakness. That becomes that support element and that support network that you need to utilize. Because if you use it out of wisdom, you'll be able to save yourself, or you'll be able to be there to help support and save someone else. And you may never know. You may never know. You have to just be okay with not knowing. I have no idea who this is helping. And where I'm absolutely okay with, I go where I'm called, I go where I'm needed, and at some point they have the information that they need, or the tools or confidence or whatever it is that they needed at that time. And it could be years from now, and I may never know. And I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with that. But again, asking that question, and there's also fear, not right. We talked about fear, but guilt and shame behind it. Oh my God, I can't believe I had these thoughts. I'm in suicide prevention, because I've been there. I'm in suicide prevention and I'm having them myself. How do I even sit here and advocate and help, to help other broken people? Because we're so good at doing that for other people. And this is why it's so important to understand and recognize that support element that I built. So when I need to utilize it, I can utilize it. But guilt and shame is another huge factor. It's a huge deterrent. Can't believe, or I should have asked, right? Or survivor's guilt, you could insert so many different things, because we each have our own individual experience. We each have something to contribute to the conversation. I really honestly don't know any veteran where suicide has not touched.
Yes.
I don't. And it's a sad factor, but it's a truthful factor. I've seen some of the most miraculous things take place as far as the dynamic of healing in a peer-based setting. Mental health is absolutely necessary. Medication, whatever anybody needs, but remember, it affects all areas of your life. So within that dynamic of like what you were doing with the Silky's Hike, that's your social reintegration. So it's so important to understand how it is affecting you, what areas it's affecting you, and understand that those domains, all 4 of those domains, they might intersect. So make sure that you're treating each one appropriately. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And oh my goodness. So I need to back up a little bit.
Sorry.
No.
When I get on it, I told you, once I get into my rhythm, I might go off a little bit, but No.
And I only want to back up because I have so many questions in my head that when you're saying something, I want to say something, I'd like to ask more about this, but
yeah, let's talk it out.
I lose myself because I get excited and then I have a tendency to monologue or rant.
We've got time. Let's talk it out.
So when you said about the vulnerability, shame, guilt, and all of the things that come along with suicidal ideation, when you and I met last year, and then I started getting involved in the Silky's Hikes and all that other stuff, I was completely lost. I had started journaling when I retired in July of 23. It was a process of peeling back a lot of layers and seeing what I thought about a lot of the things that I'd never given thought or even words to. And when we were at the Liberty Ship back in May of 24, it's funny to refer to something as last year when it was only 2 months ago, but we started talking about my transition and you and the fire watch and everything that people were doing there. I had a rough idea of a manuscript for the book that I wanted to write, but I was afraid to put it out there because I was owning every shortfall, every shameful moment, the guilt, the things I could have done better, and all of these things. And through the next few months after that, I finally got it together, and it finally published on Veterans Day of 24. And in that book, on page 125, I talk about my breakthrough moment when the suicidal ideation went into well, not action, because obviously I didn't attempt it, but I had a moment where I had a pistol in my hand. And it was still, when I wrote that back in June, July of last year, I had only mentioned it out loud to a counselor and to my wife, Michelle, to no one else. The Camaraderie Foundation asked me to come do a speech for them at their annual PTSD function. It's every June. And the Camaraderie Foundation actually helped me with paying for the counseling that I needed when I finally decided to find counseling. So it wasn't an owed debt or anything. It's just something that I wanted to do. Like, hey, there's a success story here. This stuff works. And I stood up in front of this room of people and I told my story for the first time. And I don't remember, I had this beautiful speech and everything, and I didn't hear a word of it. My ears rang the entire time I was up there. I was emotional. I was cottonmouth. But when I was done with that, the amount of power and freedom that I felt having owned that was an incredible thing that I still cannot put words to. With all of that said, I have a book. I have it. It's all out there. I've had this podcast, all this, my messaging and everything else. But on page 125 of my book says, there I was holding a pistol in my hand. That's it. Shift conversation, move to everything else. I didn't talk about what I was feeling, what I thought about that, what I've been thinking since then, that I didn't realize that I had actually drawn my pistol and staring at it. I think in the book, I just said, I realized I have a pistol on my hip. I can end it all now. I didn't go into there I was sitting there staring at a gun in my hand. Because even though I had owned it, I was still ashamed of it. I was still afraid of it. It was still very, very raw to still put it out there. And I'm still very much in the trenches of this journey. And I think it's amazing. Even I'm uncomfortable talking about it, but I think that, were you to ever find yourself in that position, I think it makes it more relatable that, you're right. The religious stigma that's there, the cultural stigma that's there, it's the easy way out. It's cowardice. It's this, it's that. It's whatever the things are being said about it. And yes, there are, as you say, collateral damage, the downstream and second order impacts of dying by suicide. I think that if you're actually in that position yourself, faced with that decision and make it through to the other side, I think all that other noise just becomes bullshit. I really do, because if you're faced with a situation like that and you come out the other side, you find growth and find a way to help other people. Stigma, guilt, shame, cultural concepts, be damned. It's a horrible place to be in.
Nobody ever thinks that they're going to find themselves in that place, right?
Exactly.
You never think that you're going to find yourself in that place. It is bad. And it's again, nobody ever thinks that they're going to find themselves in that place. I think that as I get a little bit older in life, I'm not going to tell my age on the podcast, but 32. As I get older, I'm learning to never say never, because you can find yourself in situations or positions that you never thought you'd be in. I never thought I would be in that position myself, especially being a huge advocate for it. It happens.
It's a human condition. Yeah, you're right. Life happens.
Life happens. And again, as men and women of faith, hopelessness is the number one sign. They say hope deferred makes the hurt. That's an internal. These are all in your emotions. They're all internal. This is why I say be very careful not to think that you're treating the symptom with one thing and you really need to be treating something different. Or you need to combine, because sometimes they overlap. And you need more in one area or multiple areas. Again, that's why I say it's not secular. Nobody has a normal. Everybody's normal is different. There's no 4 pieces to the pie. Your normal that day might be 20%, 40%. You know what I mean? The percentage might be broken up, and that's what your normal looks like that day. So it is, I mean, it's, again, nobody expects to find themselves in that place. And this is why I say it's so important to create your support system and utilize it, so that when you see that, oh shit,
it becomes automatic.
In this area, I know who I can call, or what thing I need to call them for, or what resources available. Like you mentioned, Camaraderie Foundation. That big shout outs to Camaraderie Foundation. They're in safe place. I know them very well. They've even paid for my mental health. I've gone through them as well. Mm-hmm. So again, I was like, I think it's time think it's time to make an appointment, or, hey, I need to call this friend today. So it's so important to do that. But, I appreciate your courage in sharing again. And this is that component of vulnerability piece, and where you thought that you were going to give your power away by saying it, you actually took it all back by speaking it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot more people need to hear when we share our testimony. Somebody needs to hear your testimony so that they can rise up to the occasion to be able to share theirs, because we all have testimony. And I'm a firm believer we never go through things in life for ourselves. It is always to help another person through. It's always. It is never. It's get over yourself.
It's amazing you say that. It is
never about you. It is always about someone else, because you have no idea the magnitude. If you could change your perspective, the magnitude, it's just like I often think about this ripple effect. Sounds really weird, right? So when you do good and, the person behind you, for their coffee, you like this ripple effect. I often think lately about the ripple effects of your no, not just your yes.
Wow.
I know that was deep.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going
to. I mean, because you're here and your yes and your obedience to certain things, it has a ripple effect that goes and it just keeps going, right? In the world, and again, you never know where it's at. But there's times where I think about there is no ripple effect when I have a no. When I say no, how does it affect who it could have helped or should have helped? You know what I mean? And this is where the empowerment and the encouragement piece from so many different veterans or so many different people at their journey in their space, it becomes so powerful to share their testimony and to help other people through their trials and tribulations, because it continues to go. You went through yours, and look at how many people on the podcast you helped. That then you're empowering them to share theirs, and how many more people that you see with your yes.
Yeah. And you know what, to that, oh my God. I need to get a sponsor so I can hire somebody to sit here and take notes. Hey, read that back. Okay. Because I'm too much blast. Yeah. Too much blast over pressure to remember all this stuff. So I had a guest on a couple episodes ago, Dr. Jennifer Burnt. She's the co-founder of Shields and Stripes. And she said that the secret to her life and her success, her growing up, her service now, and all of this other stuff is always looking for a reason to say yes. And when she said that, I was like, yeah, I've got a buddy, a childhood friend that lives on the mountaintop, and literally on a mountaintop. And if I called him and said, hey man, I need a kidney and $1,000 tomorrow, he'd get $1,000. Don't ask him how he does it. Don't ask him how he got the kidney, but he would get in his truck, the kidney, not literally, figuratively, but for $1,000, he'd get in his truck with $1,000 cash and drive through the night from the tippy top of Maine to Tampa to get here and bring me my money, just because that's who he is. He's not going to ask any questions. He's just going to do it. He always finds an excuse to say yes. And I have found in my yes, since you brought it up, the more I tell this story and the more I think about it, I'm forced to face it. I'm forced to stand in the mirror and own it day in and day out. And I find that, I think it's ridiculous that me telling my story gives someone else permission to tell theirs. I don't have that kind of power.
That was my next comment. I know. It's almost as if it gives people permission.
It does, but let me be self-deprecating here for a second. I would like to think that it's powerful enough that it gives someone else at least space, if not permission. But I find that every time that I say it, I'm helping myself even more. Like I peel back another layer and say, oh my God, I never thought about that. Conversations like this, it unlocks something new every day. So I think having these conversations, the power of your testimony. You're right. We go through this not for ourselves. We do this for somebody else, and it would be selfish to sit on my story and not have these conversations.
It's like the power to produce fruit on the tree. I'll never, only in seasons do I get to enjoy the fruits of my labor. Only in seasons. What else do you do with the other seasons? I mean, it's just all fruit for the others, right? You need to be full of it. There's so many others. There's a beautiful poem that I listened to on my way to every training that I do. I pray about it, but there's one, and it's called Holes. And if you ever get the opportunity, you can look it up on YouTube. It's called Holes. And it keeps me grounded. It helps me to remember my journey and the journey of so many other people who have not only made it, but who have not. And why I said yes and why I continue to do what I do. So if you ever get the opportunity, or anybody else who may be listening, it's different, but that's that.
I'm going to give that a listen this afternoon.
Don't call me. I'm going to get a message. Oh my God, I'm crying, because I've sent it to a couple grown men who are like, I'm crying. I'm like,
well, I will never tell you. No, kidding.
You.
No, I have found the more I embrace this vulnerability, and you know what? Let me go ahead and say this: the term vulnerability, I don't like that, because it implies that there's a weakness. You know, if you look it up in the dictionary, oh, it's a shortfall, it's a gap, it's a whatever. I think honesty. I think vulnerability is not being vulnerable to the point. Vulnerability is courageous, because you're using something that someone else can use to harm you if they're a lesser person, and you're giving it to them. That's courageous.
Remember, not weakness, wisdom.
Yeah. And I'm a believer. So yes, if I look at Holes later this afternoon and watch the video and I cry, I will not burden you with oh, you got me. I won't do that.
Don't use that word. That's not a word we use in the veteran suicide prevention space. I'm not a big fan when people use that. I hate to be a burden. That is another big
No, you're right. You're right.
It's a huge comment. That's such a stigma. I promise. If people are using that, I hope, again, and this is a personal opinion, you can have the training all day long. At the end of the day, it's really going to be up to the individual. They're going to sacrifice and take the time. I think it's an opportunity to exercise moral leadership. If you see somebody who's in need, you see them acting different, are you going to actually sacrifice and take the time to speak with them, to talk with them? Again, connection looks different for everyone. Connections listening, connections talking, connections a resource. It just is really based on the veteran's specific need at that time. It's not just one thing, and maybe it's all three things. But I will give you a little gem, one of the ones that I've heard a lot lately. When you hear people say, because of, a lot of the guilt and shame that's kind of around, suicide and what have you, you'll hear people a lot of times say, I'm tired. Focused. And it feels like, to me, it is this small window of opportunity that if you hear somebody say that you can reach without pulling it out of them to figure out what it is that they are going through, and then be that individual to care enough to support them. Hey, and it seems like it all just comes out. I'm struggling with this, financially I'm hurting with this, and this is really bad. And it's almost like it's free flowing, and they will tell you, people will tell you. But I've heard that key phrase a lot. So if people can kind of just keep their ears out for that and be courageous enough to kind of insert to figure out what that is, people will tell you a lot. And give them a resource. Send them a daily, check, buddy check. Hey, just want to know how you're doing today, or send them some encouragement, or maybe they're just isolating a little more, and make it an intention that you're going to meet them for lunch or coffee or whatever that is. Whatever that looks like, that's a big one.
Well, I wanted to ask you, what are the things we should be looking for? And you're right, that I'm just tired. I remember I was feeling that way with the hopelessness and everything else. And, for the listeners, what are some of the things that we can look for? I mean, other than being empathetic and tuning into our friends and being engaged.
Again, some of you are obvious, right? The hopelessness, increased substance abuse, isolation, detachment. If you're around somebody, whether it's a family member or friend, when they're just kind of down and out, or they might not be acting themselves. Those are some of the key ones. But the ones that one gem that I just kind of gave you is not specifically in the training, that is just one from an outsider view that within this arena that I have noticed that I really want people to also just be aware of, that can help them. And again, it's all about connecting, not counseling. Yeah, it's the biggest takeaway that I think I would have for people.
What would be the bit of advice that you would give if there's somebody out there listening to us who's struggling?
I think, so when you think about, well, we are prevention, we're also community-based. And when you think of community, in the middle is you. So whether it's a veteran who is listening, like, we need you, right? But also for people just within the community that we need as watchstanders, we need you too, which means we need everybody because we all have a part to play in suicide prevention. So we need you. Again, to my veterans, you're definitely not alone. You hear that all the time, but you have people within the community who are standing watch both with you and for you.
I like that. Somebody who wants to get involved, what are some of the first steps that they can do to get involved with helping out the Fire Watch?
Yeah. So it just really depends. Again, if you're just a single individual, independent learner, you go to thefirewatch.org, take the training, become a watchstander. And again, our biggest ask is to advocate for the program. It's take this training and utilize it. It's absolutely necessary. You take the training in hopes that you never have to utilize it, but at least you're equipped if you do. And also, if you are a business owner and you work for a business, again, we'll go into any place of employment, business group or organization and facilitate the training. It takes about an hour. So lunch and learns are a great advantage that we have. But there's more information on thefirewatch.org about that. And you can request no matter where you're at in the state of Florida. Again, we have 3 regional program directors. So we can kind of accommodate that need as well. So have us come in and facilitate the training.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you taking the time with us today. Are there any parting words for the listener out there?
I think I've said so much.
No, you've covered a lot, and I think what y'all are doing is fantastic. The program is great, and I'm actually going to go through and start clicking on some of the links and look at some of the stats and the breakdowns. I wasn't aware that was there.
I think I said everything that I need to say to the veterans or to the community. I think my more of my parting words will be my thanks towards you again for your courage to do what you're doing, not only to have me on the show today, to get to show some of my knowledge and just a little bit of my experience and my heart and passion for the veteran community and the advocacy that I have, but also for yourself, for both the veteran and first responder community, for being brave, for going beyond pushing past the fear. And doing what you're doing because you're reaching a lot of people and your journey has just begun. Mm-hmm. Your journey has just begun. So I'm so happy to see where you were last year versus where you are this year. I want to ask you how your transition is going and now look at how different the conversation is.
Yeah.
And again, it just goes to show any random individual. I mean, we interacted for maybe a matter of 20 to 30 minutes, but just by that one question that I asked you, kind of got your mind spinning, and you never know when you're going to come across these people, right? I don't ask you that. I just did. Again, that ripple effect of.
It's because no one else was there yet. Everybody else was still setting up tables. I was the only person done with my table.
I needed somebody to, share a story with, and it just so happened to be you. But conversations can be fruitful, and they just will multiply. So again, thank you for what you're doing in your advocacy and your hard work. And I look forward to many more podcasts.
Well, thank you, Brianne. I appreciate you coming on here today. And hopefully soon I will get over my dislike for crowds and people and start going to some of these meetups that you do. I know seeing stuff that you put out on LinkedIn and everything, you appear to be everywhere. You appear to make it effortless. And so you're like, I'm a one-woman show. I've got to get out there. I'm like, you make this look easy. I'm exhausted just watching you and some of the other folks here in the Bay Area that are as active. I'm like, do they ever just sit down and watch TV? Do they ever just maybe I'll go get ice cream tonight and not go do this thing. I mean, it's like you guys are everywhere, but it's paying off. It's paying off, but y'all are everywhere.
It's a thought. Trust me. It's a thought. But yeah, I appreciate everything that you're doing. Thanks for having me on. And we'll definitely chat soon.
Great. I appreciate it. And with that, we are done. Brianne, I can't thank you enough for this conversation, for the life-saving work that you're doing with the Firewatch. Your mission is one that absolutely matters. And I know this episode is going to resonate with so many people who are listening. To everyone out there, if you're struggling, you're not alone. There are people who care and people who will step up and the resources available to help you. Don't hesitate to reach out. For more information, check out thefirewatch.org to learn more and get involved. Again, this episode was powered by Polestar Coffee. Fuel your mission with the finest craft roasted beans. Use this story at checkout on polestarcoffee.com for 10% off your order. If you found value in today's conversation with Brianne Brown, do me a favor. Share this episode, leave a review, and follow Tell This Story on your favorite podcast platforms. Remember, the way forward begins here. See you next time.